Joining our production team are Jessica and Bethany from our partners at Education Northwest, who will be managing the WebEx technology. You'll also see them in the chat and Q&A to help address questions you may have during the live session. And now I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today's session. First, I'd like to introduce my colleague and fellow VISTA training coordinator, Eric Powell, who's been in this position for 6 years. Eric served as a VISTA with Rhode Island Campus Compact in 2006, and then as a VISTA leader with Illinois Campus Compact in 2008. Next, we are joined by Taryn Vanaski. Taryn served with AmeriCorps NCCC in Class 10, the Sacramento Pacific region, and Class 11, the DC Capital region, as well as with AmeriCorps Vista in Boston, Massachusetts. She's also currently a program officer in the Pennsylvania State Office with the corporation. And also joining us today is Erin Horning. Erin is currently serving as a VISTA in Boston, Mass. At Excel Education. Erin began her service in November of 2014, and before joining VISTA, Erin served with AmeriCorps NCCC in Vinton, Iowa. And now it's my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Eric. Eric?
Thanks, Molly. Today we are going to start by reviewing some of the various policies and provisions that impact living on the living allowance, including public assistance, which has already been mentioned in the chat, student loans, and outside employment. Then, in the second half of the session, we'll move into sharing resources with one another around budgeting, expense tracking, and saving on everyday expenses. At the end, we will close with a question and answer session. To get us started, I'd like to share a quote from President Johnson regarding the living allowance. You might remember hearing this during your pre-service orientation, but it's very important that we want to share it with you again. Your pay will be low, the conditions of your labor will often be difficult, but you will have the satisfaction of leading a great national effort, and you will have the ultimate reward which comes to those who serve their nation and who serve their fellow man. Be sure to keep this in mind now and throughout your year of service, especially on those days when it comes time to pay your bills. Even though you might have a hard time now, the work you are doing will live on for many years. To start, we'd like to take a quick poll to check in about your current situation. Please review the options and select the answer that best applies to you on the right-hand side of the screen.
All right, we are going to give you guys just a few seconds to go ahead and submit your responses for the poll. So as soon as you have the opportunity, we would like to know, have you supported yourself before? So I think we have a little bit more time, but as soon as you guys are able, go ahead and answer that question. Have you supported yourself before? Many people come to VISTA during different periods of their life. Some people are fresh out of college or out of high school. Others are in a transitional period in their life. So we'll see where we end up today. And the poll has ended, and the responses should be coming in momentarily. Just 1 second while we wait for them. Okay. Yep, here they come, and there they are. All right, so it looks like the main answer is, wow, almost 100 of you have supported yourself before. So it'll be interesting to hear from you and your advice as we move throughout the presentation today. What things are different living on the VISTA Living Allowance as compared to before. It looks like the second most popular answer is that you have other resources in addition to the living allowance, which is great, maybe savings, retirement, parents, family, etc. Third most popular answer is that this is the first time I've supported myself completely. 32 of you selected that. And a few of you said none of the options reflect my situation. So hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about what's happening in your world. And a number of you were also unable to answer. But thanks so much to everyone for joining us today and sharing your responses with us. Eric, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Molly. We start with this poll because we want to keep in mind that everyone's personal situation is different, and there are a variety of factors at play. There is no magic solution for living on the Vista Living Allowance, no one-size-fits-all answer. This webinar, though, is an opportunity to reflect on your own situation, learn some new resources, and share your own tips. An important starting place is to seek out advice from those within your own community. Perhaps you can connect with a former Vista at your site or at a partner organization. Perhaps there are other AmeriCorps members in your community as well. Your CNCS state office can connect you with other members in the area. Either way, these are the people who will have the most up-to-date tips about ways to make the most out of living on the Living Allowance in your area. Many of you also may have noticed, but we have an optional handout that follows along with this presentation to help you take notes and write down resources you want to come back to later. If you were not able to download and print that before, we've put a link to it in the chat right now. Before we dive in, let's quickly review the Living Allowance and its purpose. VISTA is designed as a full-time immersion program, and the AmeriCorps VISTA program intentionally provides a living allowance that enables you to live very frugally, like the community you are serving. It is an important part of the experience. The allowance is intended to cover basic necessities such as housing, food, and utilities, and is based on poverty rates for a single individual in your geographic area. The living allowance is paid biweekly, meaning every 2 weeks, and deposited directly into your bank account. You can always review the living allowance rates and pay schedule on the VISTA campus or in your workbook from PSO. We've added links in the chat to the pay calendar and county rates right now. You can always find an accurate statement of your personal biweekly income in your MyAmeriCorps account in the My Living Allowance link. When looking at your earnings statement deductions, you will want to pay attention to a few things. As a VISTA, you do not need to pay into Social Security or Medicare, nor will you accrue these benefits while serving. In terms of taxes, you will notice that we do deduct federal taxes, but we do not deduct state taxes. While it is unlikely that you will owe state or local taxes on your living allowance income, it is wise to prepare just in case, and in particular if you have other household income. Most states have a state tax calculator or charts that will give you rates on your taxable income. If you would like to explore the income tax rate in your state, taxfoundation.org has a compiled list, and we've put a link in the chat for you. For any of you who may be on a grant, meaning that your sponsor pays you directly, not the VISTA program, your living allowance statements will not be available in your MyAmeriCorps account, but will come to you directly from your sponsor. Your pay schedule may also vary slightly, so you'll need to confirm with your sponsor or supervisor for exact pay dates. Now, let's look at how the living allowance impacts some important policies and programs. As we introduced during pre-service orientation, the VISTA Living Allowance should not be counted as income when applying to public assistance programs. Your living allowance, or any other payments you receive from the VISTA program, should not count towards eligibility for almost all federal, state, or local governmental programs assistance. The government benefits you are receiving, or may receive, should remain the same. However, there is one exception to this provision, which is SNAP, formerly called food stamps. If you are receiving SNAP benefits prior to enrolling in the VISTA program, all payments from VISTA should be excluded from calculating your eligibility or level of assistance. If you are applying during VISTA service, your VISTA income will be counted when determining SNAP benefits. There are many programs out there for you to consider, and there are a couple of ways you can locate programs. Online, there are a few benefits program directories you could explore, including benefits.gov and 211 info. If your community or state has a 211 info, you can also call their hotline and speak to a resource navigator. Another option is to visit a local community center or county office to ask someone in person. Oftentimes, it may be useful to talk to someone in person to discuss your options. When applying for assistance, you will want to print service letters from your MyAmeriCorps account via the Service Letters link to provide proof that your income should be disregarded. You can call the VISTA Member Support Unit for assistance if you have any issues locating your service letter. Student debt can be a very large burden for VISTAs during their service year, so there are also some important loan programs to be aware of to postpone, reduce, and even eliminate your loan payments. We introduced these programs at PSO and encourage you to explore these further with us on October 15th, when we will be holding a webinar specifically devoted to managing student loans. During that session, we will look at these programs in depth. There is also a registration link posted in the chat for you. On May 3rd, 2015, the VISTA program revised its policy on outside employment to make VISTA service accessible to the widest possible range of candidates regardless of economic status. VISTAs may now have outside employment during service, so long as that employment is legal, part-time, does not interfere with the VISTA assignment, is not an employed position at the sponsoring organization, and the outside employment is approved by your VISTA supervisor. The outside employment request form can be found on the VISTA campus, which we've also just shared in the chat. Please keep in mind that having outside employment will increase your tax burden and thus may reduce your public assistance benefits, also known as SNAP, HEAP, Medicaid, and other health care insurance subsidies. Now, let's hear from a current member who has experience juggling her VISTA service and outside employment. Erin Horning is currently a VISTA member at Excel Education in Boston, Massachusetts, and has outside employment as a research assistant. Erin, please tell us about your experience.
Well, thank you, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin, and like Eric said, I am a VISTA serving in Boston. Excel is a nonprofit that helps low-income adults prepare for and pass their high school equivalency test. We offer free classes and one-on-one support. My title is Marketing and Development Specialist, and that really gives me the freedom to build capacity in lots of fun ways. In terms of financial situation, I was not in very good financial standing when I began my term of service with Excel. I came right off of a previous year of service in NCCC. I'm far from home and don't have many options to fall back on for financial support. So when I read that the new director of AmeriCorps VISTA made an amendment to the no second job or you're fired policy, I jumped on the opportunity immediately, and having that extra cushion has made a huge difference to me and has really impacted my VISTA service positively as well. So first, I'll talk about what my outside employment is, and then I'll go into how I balance it with my VISTA service. So I work as a per diem research assistant for $9 an hour for one of my former college professors at Penn State. My job is to research and annotate 19th century journals of Mary Moody Emerson, and we're publishing them at the Northeastern University's Women Writers Project online. I really love this job. My schedule is very flexible. I get in about 10 to 15 hours per week, and I choose when I fit those hours in, so I can work anywhere with free Wi-Fi and probably coffee, and then the extra income works out each month to be about $300 to $400. Now, I balance this with my VISTA service because my VISTA hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, roughly, so I spend nights and weekends fitting in my outside employment hours. This arrangement is definitely ideal. I can work up to 15 hours from cafes, my bedroom, libraries, but I don't have to reach all 15 of them if I happen to be particularly busy at my VISTA job that week. I think it would be a lot harder to balance both of these jobs if my outside employment wasn't so flexible. So I feel like I'm really lucky in that way. Still, full disclosure is imperative from the beginning. My communication with my outside employer about my priorities as a VISTA was straightforward and honest from the very beginning. I think that presenting that expectation before I started my part-time job has also made the balancing act much easier. My outside employment also gives me a chance to spend time doing what I love. I love this literary research, but it's very different from the work I do as a VISTA. And I find that when I return to my VISTA work, I'm more refreshed. I feel more creative than I did before having this other reason to disconnect from it for a few hours. My two jobs allow me to step back from each of them, one fully for multiple times a week, and I perform better at both of them. And I use my time more wisely than I did before having two jobs. So even with a little extra income, money management is still very important. Now that I'm not fretting as much about what sort of financial situation I'll be in post-VISTA, I have to make sure I'm setting myself up for success and not getting overly confident about my new income. And it is easy to get excited, but right now I know that it's more important to prepare for my life after AmeriCorps and possible unemployment than it is to buy a new pair of shoes, even though it's hard sometimes. However, I still let myself enjoy the huge weight that has been lifted thanks to my new outside employment and the policy change. Not only does it let people like me breathe a little easier, but it also makes a year of national service through VISTA more feasible for a wider range of people who otherwise I don't even think would have applied. So that's all I have for now, but feel free to ask any questions, and I look forward to answering them during the Q&A portion.
Thank you, Erin. Now let's shift gears and start talking about some specific tips and tools. For each of these categories, we are going to offer some suggestions and then open the conversation up to you all to share what has worked well for you. When prompted, we will ask that you share ideas or links using the chat feature. At the end of this session, we will compile all the suggestions into a list that will be posted to the VISTA campus. My colleague Taryn will lead us through this section.
Thanks, Eric, and hello, everyone. As you heard earlier, I served as a VISTA member in Boston, Massachusetts with an organization called Read Boston. Having served 2 previous terms with NCCC, which did pay for most of my expenses such as housing and food, I definitely had to create a budget and come up with different ways to stretch those living allowance dollars. So let's start with budgeting, which is a great strategy to help you during your year of service and beyond. Simply put, budgeting is the practice of tracking your income and your expenses. At its most basic level, budgeting means being aware of your income, your spending, and working towards your savings goals. One of the most important things to remember is that budgeting only works if you stick to your system, so it's important to develop a system that'll work for you. Here are some basic steps to get you started. First, you'll want to create an estimate of your current income and expenses. You could choose to do this based on a weekly or monthly timeline or whatever works best for you. Next, you'll want to have a way to consistently track your actual expenses and income in order to stay aware of how close you are to your budget. You could do this using one of the many online tools available or even use an Excel spreadsheet. Once you start tracking your spending, keep in mind that you can always reassess as needed. Try tracking your spending over a month of your budget and see where you need to make adjustments. And like most things in life, try your best and be forgiving of yourself. Living on a strict budget is difficult. Know that you may not have a balanced budget each month and be prepared to review and update as needed. Ultimately, the goal for a budget is to maximize savings, not just match spending to income. As you track your spending over time, observe your habits and look for any surprises. Listing out categories for each of your major expenses and reviewing your total costs on a weekly or monthly basis will show you where most of your money goes and potentially where there are opportunities to save. See how small things that you know are unnecessary add up and discover ways you can challenge yourself and beat targets. Saving at any time, let alone during your service year, can seem daunting, so let's talk about some more tips for maximizing savings. If you have a checking and savings account with the same bank credit union, you can set up automated transfers. Even small amounts such as $20 a paycheck or month will add up. When I was at Vista, I was able to put $25 out of each paycheck into savings right off the bat. It was easier to part with it if I felt like I didn't have it to begin with. At the end of each month, I'd review and put any additional money possible into savings. Again, keep in mind that those small amounts do add up. It's also a good idea to compare interest rates with different banks and credit unions. Sometimes smaller local institutions are able to offer higher interest rates on savings or checking accounts, so it's always good to shop around when setting up a bank account. Be careful with credit. The easiest way to maintain your budget is don't spend money you don't have. Credit can be appealing in the short term, but really try to use credit only in true emergencies. Accruing more debt will hurt your savings goals long term. As I said earlier, it's not enough to just make a budget. You have to actually follow it. That means you'll need to track your spending accurately. You can track your spending in a variety of ways. Most online banking systems will auto-categorize most of your expenses for you. If not, Mint.com is a great free web tool that allows you to categorize each of your expenses, set budgets for each category, and easily see in charts where your money is going. There are also some other great online tools to explore, like Spendster, or a free app you can download called Spending Tracker. Erin has some experience using Mint, so now I'll invite her back to share some more.
All right, thank you, Taryn. And this is Erin here. I have been a fan of Mint and the app, also the website, for many years now, and it looks like there are people in the chat who like it as well. I used it heavily when I began my Vista service so that I could work out exactly what my expenses would be each month. I sync my bank accounts, my bills, my student loans into Mint, and then I create a very detailed monthly budget. It was actually pretty fun to do. So I get notifications on my phone and my email when a bill is due or when I get close to going over a budget that I've set for myself. But my favorite tool in Mint is the goals option. So I knew I wanted to end my term of service with enough savings to get by for a few months in case I couldn't find a job right away. And Mint helped me figure out how much I need to save in my time frame and made it easy for me to set aside money each month toward that goal. Oh, it's just such a cool website. All right, that's it. I'll send it back to you, Taryn.
Thanks, Erin. If you are looking for a simpler, low-tech option, you could also try the envelope system, where you keep your cash for the week in an envelope and track your spending by writing down what you buy on the outside of the envelope. The Vista campus also has a compiled list of recommended resources for budgeting, along with a budget calculator, comparisons for different budgeting apps, and many more tips and strategies. So you can find that link in the chat. Now, we would like to invite you to share with us all in the chat what types of tips and tools do you have. Many of you have likely tried out some applications or budgeting systems, and we'd like to know what has worked for you. Please share in the chat window. Make sure it goes to all participants. We will review a few out loud with the group and encourage you to write down a few that seem interesting or even to follow up later with a fellow Vista member. As a reminder, at the end of the session, we will be compiling the list of suggestions and posting them to the Vista campus.
I see a lot of people mentioned Erin's suggestion of using Mint.com, which is a great resource. Catherine says she created a very extensive Excel document that calculates all of her expenses for her. Alexis uses Money Monitor. Jocelyn also uses an organization credit counseling program. And it looks like someone mentions they ride the bus when they can catch it to save money on expenses as opposed to driving a car and spending money on gas. And I also see Julia talks about Walmart Savings Catcher is a great way to save money when you're going shopping for different items.
Definitely, yeah. I see a few that have mentioned the Walmart Savings Catcher, as well as going back to basics and using Excel. So great suggestions, and please make sure to write down any that you see that are interesting to you. Let's talk about housing. For those of you paying for housing, yes, this will most likely be your largest expense, so it's crucial to find affordable housing. Many of you likely are set up with housing, but if you are still searching, start by comparing rental ads and considering different areas. PadMapper is a website that compiles rental listings, including Craigslist and beyond, into a map where you can filter by lots of search criteria. You can also set up a listing notification alerts on both PadMapper and Craigslist to let you know when a certain type of listing you are interested in gets posted. This way, you can be the first to respond. When looking for housing in a specific area or price range, often being one of the first to respond is really important. Please note, as with any online source, especially Craigslist, what you see isn't always 100% true. I personally recently moved and used a variety of websites to find my apartment. I noticed at times deals that were too good to be true, such as cheap rent in a usually pricey area of town, often were just that, not true. Be careful who you give your information to, and if it feels like a scam or something isn't right, trust your gut and look at another listing or site. Your social network is also an important tool when looking for housing. Either through social media or through word of mouth, letting people know what you are looking for can help create connections and opportunities that might not have been known about from just browsing online. Once you have housing, if your rent due date falls at a time that is difficult with your other bills and expenses, you could also ask your landlord about setting up a rent payment plan, maybe paying rent twice a month in smaller chunks, etc. Or you may be able to negotiate what day of the month your rent is due on. Beyond the cost of rent, there are also a lot of other expenses related to housing that can also add up. Try exploring ways to make your housing more energy efficient. For example, Energy.gov has a lot of tips and tools to help reduce energy costs. If you are renting, you may not be able to change the appliances or heating source for your home, but there are some small things that you can do to reduce costs. For example, space heaters and portable heaters really suck down a lot of energy and can increase your energy bills. Another small way to limit your energy usage is to unplug electronics from outlets when you're not using them, or try to air dry dishes and clothing instead of using appliances. Furnishing your place can be expensive as well. Try checking out the free section of Craigslist or looking at budget decorating blogs like Apartment Therapy. In addition to decorating ideas, you can also find some great recipes for making your own cleaning products that cost less and last a lot longer than store-bought products. Now let's hear from you again. Are there any resources or tools you found useful to save on housing expenses? Remember, this could be related to finding housing or saving on housing-related expenses such as energy efficiency or decorating.
And I know there's lots and lots of comments about saving money on housing. It looks like the most common, of course, is getting a roommate. Julia and Kenneth both mentioned that it saved them 50 to 60% on rent by getting a roommate, which is a great cost-effective and relationship-building idea. Anne mentions what Taryn mentioned about making her own cleaning products. I also see some people talked about turning down the air conditioning so you're not spending as much money on utilities. And I see there's a few more coming in, so keep them coming as we continue in the presentation.
Definitely. I see freecycle.com mentioned for free stuff a few times. Also, in the winter, putting up plastic over the windows. I know that will keep some of that cold air out. So again, thank you for sharing all your suggestions, and please keep them coming. Let's look at transportation. Transportation is definitely another expense that can add up. If you can, try commuting by public transit. I know it takes longer, but it's cheaper than gas, and you can spend the time reading or relaxing instead of raging against the car in front of you. Bike commuting or walking is another great option since it's free and it gives you some exercise. Google Maps has a route search feature that you can filter by public transit, biking, or walking, and it will show you the best route and timing for each scenario. This is especially helpful if you're starting out with bike commuting, since finding a bike-friendly route is very important. For those of you who must drive to work, try carpooling or rideshare. For finding the cheapest gas in the area, try GasBuddy.com as a resource. You can also download the GasBuddy app to find the best gas price based on your location while you're out and about anywhere in the country. Finally, make sure you get your reimbursements for travel as part of your VISTA duties. It can definitely add up. It's time to hear from you again. Are there resources or tools you found useful to save on transportation expenses?
There's been some interesting chatter in the chat. There was a lot of talk about riding bikes and public transit. One person mentioned sometimes cities' public transit could be expensive, and one recommendation was cities like Oakland, California have an official carpool that they arrange that saves people, so you can look to see if your city has any kind of a city-sanctioned carpool to get you to and from your service site. Also, I see Rachel mentions a credit card that gives 5% back on gas, so that way you're getting money back into your account and not spending too much money. I also see more people talking about ride sharing and using Google Maps to try to find the most direct route to save you money and not wasting gas.
Definitely, and I saw a lot of different bike resources mentioned. They mentioned that Google, I think it is Google, has Elevation, which will help find bike routes that are easier to handle than others. Also, I saw bike co-ops for free or for bike repair. And someone mentioned earlier in the chat about a community member buying old bikes from yard sales and fixing them up and giving them away. So definitely look out for those resources in your community that will help you save money, especially on transportation. Groceries. Groceries are another major expense. The biggest way to save on groceries is to only buy food that you will eat. Not using your groceries before they go bad wastes money. To help you with this, create a meal plan. Make your list of meals for the week and then grocery shop only for those items you need. Find the cheapest grocery store in your area. You know it's not Whole Foods, but maybe it's Target, Bi-Mart, Winco, Grocery Outlet, etc. Factor in how far you have to travel to get to a store. If you have to travel significantly out of your way, that might not end up being the cheaper option overall. There are lots of great blogs and websites out there to help with budget meal planning. Budget Bites is a food blog with tons of budget recipes and meal planning tips. A great feature is that every recipe includes an estimate for both the overall cost and per serving cost to make the dish. 100 Days of Real Food has meal plans you can access that are based on SNAP benefit amounts. To get to that, you go to 100daysofrealfood.com and you click on meal plans, and there's an option for free meal plans there. Once you have a meal plan in mind, you can use an app such as Google's Food Planner to store and save your plan and make grocery lists. When shopping, do cost comparisons. Make sure you are using the unit price listed on the label on the shelf and figure out what's most cost effective. Shop generic, or if an item is on sale, see if that's cheaper. Use coupons when you can, but don't buy something you wouldn't normally use just because you have a coupon for it. Sign up for the club card at your local grocery store. These cards offer savings on items throughout the store. It's also a good idea to find out where there are local food pantries in your community. Foodpantries.org has a directory that is a good starting place. There's also a list available on the Vista campus of which farmers markets across the country are accepting EBT that we will put into the chat now. So let's hear from you again. Are there resources or tools you found useful to save on groceries?
And who doesn't want to save money on food? Earlier in the chat, Jocelyn mentioned electronic bank transfer. EBT works wonders, so you might want to look into that. Deborah talked about looking into your local food banks and seeing what opportunities are available there, as well as looking at a nonprofit called SHARE that has major discounts for people. A lot of people, including Shannon, talked about looking at websites like Pinterest and other social media websites for recipes to find discounts, as well as couponing. Great way to either get electronic coupons sent to you or ask for them by mail.
I've seen a few people mention particular apps such as Cartwheel for Target. Also, I saw some people mention Aldi, which is a grocery store in certain communities. I guess it's not in every community, but in some of them there are. Wholesale clubs do accept SNAP, so that's great. Ollie's Bargain Outlets. So lots of good suggestions being shared to all participants in the chat. Let's talk about having some fun, entertainment. There are lots of ways you can save on entertainment. An easy start for TV and movies would be to ditch the cable. Get Netflix or Hulu, or use your library. In addition to books, many have DVDs and CDs that you can rent as well. There are also often lots of opportunities for discounted or free services and events. Perhaps you can volunteer usher at concert halls or a local festival, or get free or discounted classes by offering to help clean at a local yoga studio. I know when I was a Vista, I often found great opportunities to usher at music shows or plays. It was a great way to serve the local community as well as do something fun for free. Some gyms or services may also offer discounted memberships or have off hours, student rates, or sliding scales. And if you're interested in continuing education, there are also some great free online courses available through Coursera in everything from business, computer science, to art history and career development. If you're interested in learning or getting better at another language, check out Duolingo, a free online resource to learn languages. So I see a lot of suggestions already. It is time to share some of those resources and tools you found useful to save on entertainment.
And I'm going to turn to my coworker, Taryn, to read the comments in the chat for this one.
Yeah. I saw some easy ones like going outdoors. I enjoyed that suggestion, such as spending time outdoors and just kind of enjoying nature and enjoying what your community has to offer that way, as well as free outdoor music. That's a great one. A library card is an amazing resource, someone said. Someone bought a USB TV tuner, afternoon movies, and some ideas for the why and going to the gym. They definitely have some different ways that you can afford a membership there. So lots of different suggestions are coming in. Open mics, those are a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone, for sharing all these wonderful suggestions. All right, so we shared a lot of resources with you, and you all have contributed a lot with each of the different topics. Now we'd like to take a moment to reflect and ask you to think about one tip or resource you'd like to try out moving forward. Please, again, share in the chat box and make sure you send to all participants. So what's that one tip or resource you'd like to try moving forward from this?
All right, Taryn, this is Molly. I might jump in here and help out with some of these because it looks like it's going pretty quickly because there's so many great suggestions. It looks like a few people are going to try Mint, which is fantastic. Erin did a great job of sharing that information. Some folks are going to try Snap and using the library. I know I saw some people that were kind of surprised at how much fun stuff and neat stuff the library had. Care.com is another big one. Gas Buddy, Bunny would be cool too though. So Gas Buddy, benefits.gov, a Walmart card saver. Going back to food pantries, Mint and geocaching, which is fantastic. Great way to get some exercise, get outside. Someone is even going to try geocaching at Walmart. Have fun with that. That'll be great. Farmers markets. And lots of other items are in there as well. Let me just scroll up. See, I see
Nextdoor.com. I haven't heard of that before, but that's additional tip to be shared.
Yeah. Great. Well, those are all excellent suggestions, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing.
As we close, I just want to remind everyone who and what the Corporation State Office, or CSO, is. The CSO is the corporation piece on the ground in your state with you. The VISTA Member Support Unit, or VMSU, helps with benefit-related questions, living allowance, education award, etc., while the CSO is your local arm of CNCS. We interact mostly with sponsors or your project and are in the background to ensure that you have a successful and fulfilling year. You may or may not have any interaction with your CSO during your VISTA year, but we are here to field a variety of questions, offer support during your service year, or, as we're about to find out, help you when you might be in a jam. Sometimes we are the last to know when you need help, and by the time we find out, it's too late and we are no longer able to offer assistance. It's important for you to reach out to us during emergencies or difficult situations. Members can ask their CSOs for help even when the site and supervisor are already providing support. And you don't have to wait for something bad to happen. You can check in with us. We'd love to hear when things are going well, because sometimes good news is oftentimes just as valuable as bad news. One way you can help other VISTAs living on the living allowance is to let us know if you have a great area to live in or if you found a great community resource that might help other VISTAs in the area. We also might be able to offer very important local or community advice or share tips and resources to enhance your safety and reduce security threats. If something does happen, your CSO might be able to access resources and offer assistance that your site cannot. We can approve additional leave if an extended absence is required. And in some instances, the state program director may be able to reimburse you to cover extraordinary costs, up to $500, that are a result of theft, uninsured fire loss, etc. Remember, this is a reimbursement, and whatever is replaced must be essential and directly connected to completing your service. Emailing your CSO is very simple. The email address is usually just the state abbreviation at cns.gov. So Tennessee would be tn@cns.gov, and New York would be ny@cns.gov. You can also find their contact information if you go to nationalservice.gov/state offices. Some corporation state offices even have pages on the VISTA campus, so you can check them out there as well. Let's close with some next steps to work on after the session. First, connect with your community. Your local community, neighbors, stores, agencies, etc. have a lot of knowledge and resources to share. Starting a simple conversation can often lead to a little-known community resource. Try asking at least one person for local tips. Second, start or review your personal budget system. We discussed a few online tools as some low-tech options. Just find out the one that works for you. And remember, budgets don't work unless you follow them, so take time to find a system that works best for you. Finally, check out the Vista Campus, the resources and forums. There's an entire site devoted to resources for managing your living allowance, as well as a forum for members to share their tips and questions. And you can see that information in the chat. I hope you'll be able to take one or two of these steps and eventually develop a system that works for you. Be sure to share your experience on the Vista campus with other Vistas. And with that, let's turn it back to Molly.
Great. Thank you so much, Taryn and Eric and Aaron. It's been a great session, and I know that we're probably going to have a pretty lively Q&A component, but before we get there, we want to know what you guys thought. So on the right side of your screen, you will find a quick poll where you can share feedback about the webinar. Please take a moment to answer the questions. We like to be able to improve these webinars, and your input does help us. So we've given you a lot to think about, and now it's time for your questions. I know that there's been a lot of chat back and forth about the reason that the stipend is low and how some people are finding it really rewarding and challenging, yet overall a really great experience to live on the stipend, while others are, frustrated, and we understand that living on limited income. So now's your chance. You can ask more of those questions. You can ask questions using the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Just make sure you're putting your question into the Q&A panel and not to the chat panel. And I would also like to invite Brad back to remind us how to ask questions for any of our phone guests.
Certainly. If you'd like to ask a question over the phone, please unmute your phone and press *1 and record your name when prompted. If at any time your question has been answered, you may remove your request by pressing *2. Once again, that is *1 and record your name when prompted if you would like to ask a question over the phone.
Great. Thank you so much, Brad. And while we're waiting for some of the phone questions to come in, we will start going through some of the questions that have come in online. So, Emily would like to know if we have any resources for free tax preparation and filing services that are available to Vistas. So would any of our presenters like to answer that?
This is Taryn. I, in my NCCC hat, was able to do a program through VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, and that's a free tax preparation resource for low-income individuals such as Vista members. And so if you go to the IRS website, irs.gov, I believe, and search VITA, V-I-T-A, you can find more information about where VITA tax sites are and where to go to get assistance for your taxes. So the IRS site is irs.gov, and the program is called VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. That's one resource at least.
Great. Thank you so much, Taryn. And that's a really important community resource for everyone to take advantage of, or most people can take advantage of that. Excellent. So Haley had a couple questions about working through the outside employment policy, which Aaron so eloquently shared with us, and I posted a link into the Q&A channel on the Vista Campus. It's vistacampus.gov/resources/outside employment policy. So if you have any questions or you want to know more about that, you can go ahead and ask those questions. And actually, Aaron, we have a question for you. So Betsy wants to know if you still receive benefits with your additional income, or are you not eligible? And the questions that she's specifically interested in are SNAP benefits or Medicaid due to low income. It sounds like Betsy receives some current assistance, and she might just be curious about whether or not that might continue.
That is a great question, Betsy. So I currently receive SNAP benefits. When I first signed up for them, I was getting $194 a month, and then when I started my outside employment, I reported it to that office, and I was dropped down to $94 a month. So I'm still thankful for the $94. It's definitely still helping me, but it did put a little bit of a drop into my SNAP benefits. I can't speak for other sorts of benefits because that is the only one I currently get.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Cruz would like to know why our pay doesn't equal the monthly amount. When we receive our biweekly allowance, why is our pay like $100 less? Eric, would you like to talk about why the monthly payment amount that is online or in the PSO workbook is a little different than what comes home in the check?
Sure. The short answer is essentially that you were probably quoted a monthly amount, and either if you go to your PSO workbook or to the Vista campus, there's a chart that explains how to calculate what the biweekly or every 2-week amount that is that'll show up in your living allowance bank account. But you need to remember that that's before taxes, so chances are the W-4 that you filled out, the federal tax withholding, in your my.americorps.gov account is deducting federal taxes from that. So it's just simply that the VISTA program pays you every 2 weeks, and if you look at it monthly, it's going to have an incorrect calculation. So make sure to go to the Vista Campus Living Allowance Benefits page and check out that chart to determine how much will appear in your bank account before taxes.
Mm-hmm.
This is Taryn. I just wanted to add to the rate that typically we say is a monthly rate. I like to call it a pay rate, partly because the VISTA members don't get paid by the month. So taking that rate and multiplying it by 12 to get the annual amount, and then dividing it by 365 days to get the daily amount, and then taking that daily amount and timesing it by 14 days, which is how many days in a pay period that you get paid for. And that's the figure that you should have seen in your PSO binder or on the Vista Vista campus website. So I like to think of it as a pay rate as opposed to a monthly rate, since Vista members don't get paid by the month.
Great. Thanks for that extra insight, Taryn. It's always helpful. And let's see, there was a question from Madison about which letter should we print in order for our SNAP appointments. I have a few different service letter options. And Erin, probably when you went to get your SNAP benefits, did you take a copy of your Vista Public Service Disregard letter, or did you take anything else with you to your interview and meeting?
You'll have to forgive me because I forget the name of the whatever I printed from the my.americorps portal, but it was on there. So if that is the name of it, then that's probably it. But I just went onto the portal and clicked the link and pressed print.
Yeah, and for anyone that needs any help or has questions, you guys can reach out to the VMSU, the Vista Member Support Unit, and their contact information is in your PSO workbook as well as on the Vista campus. All right, Brad, do we have any questions on the phone?
We have had no responses from people on the phone.
Okay, great. All right, so Alex is curious. He or she, can't help but wonder, what is the rationale behind requiring VISTAs to live in poverty? If VISTA is specifically an anti-poverty program, what does this say about the agency? Eric or Taryn, would one of you like to shed a little insight on the theory behind the VISTA Living Allowance and maybe how it's connected to our charter agreement or the DVSA?
Sure. This is Eric. I can start. So as Molly mentioned, the DVSA, or the Domestic Volunteer Service Act, was created to show that VISTAs are not necessarily living in poverty, but they're living at or approximately at the poverty level of the community in which they're serving, so that Vistas have a better experience and a little bit more knowledge of their community in which they're working. The one thing I wanted to point out about the question is that the VISTA program doesn't require Vistas to live in poverty, which is part of the reason why, after a long series of thinking about it, we came out with the outside employment policy to allow Vistas to have another job, such that, we do want Vistas to understand the community and the level of poverty they're in, but we also want them to be able to manage their own living allowance. So we did recently change the policy partially around that reason. Taryn, did you have any other comments?
Just to add that, it's been described as a full immersion program where you are either living where you've lived all your life in a low-income community, or relocating to be a part of a new community where you're not only serving people in that community, you're a part of that community. And so setting the living allowance at a low rate allows you to be more a part of that community. That's additional.
Yeah. And Eric and Taryn, thank you both for those points. And, very recently, I believe it was May, right, guys, where we changed the outside employment policy because we heard from a lot of individuals that they were unable to serve and finish their service with VISTA due to the challenges presented to them by only living on the living allowance. And so we were very excited to give our VISTA members the opportunity to have additional outside employment. So as Erin mentioned, a lot of the benefits and her strategy for navigating that, just keep in mind that it should be part-time. It should not be directly connected to the organization that you're serving with, and that you need to get approval from your supervisor as well as also from your state office. And there is a link and there's a section on the VISTA campus where you guys can access more information. Does anybody else want to add any final thoughts about the stipend or how using the outside employment policy might help alleviate some of those stresses or concerns? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for that discussion and that question, Alex. Let's see. Cruz would like to know, when will we receive our reimbursements for travel costs and spending cash while at the PSO? And that information will come, or that reimbursement should come about 8 to 10 weeks after PSO. You can call the VMSU or reach out to the training coordinator at your PSO for more details. And let's see. So here's a question from Samantha about health insurance. Samantha asks, when applying for health insurance through healthcare.gov, do you have to consider our stipend as income? Eric or Taryn, would one of you like to take that question?
This is Eric, and great question, Samantha. Healthcare is a very, very important topic, as we all know. The answer would be yes, because the VISTA Living Allowance is income. It's not a salary, but it is income that's coming to you. So if healthcare.gov or any insurance provider is asking if you have any source of income, you would need to report your living allowance as income.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And probably the best people to ask that question also are the healthcare navigators. So going to healthcare.gov, you'll then get redirected most likely to a state health exchange and then be able to connect. And we've had some very successful VISTA members work as or with healthcare navigators. All right, so we have another tax question, and I think I might send this one to you, Taryn. Jackie would like to know, and I don't know if we can actually answer this for Jackie, but Jackie would like to know, what should I claim on my W-4 so that I won't owe anything after I file my taxes?
That is a very good question, and one that we're often not able to answer, partly because we're not able to we are not tax experts and aren't able to give tax advice. However, any kind of questions that you have on your taxes, whether it's the forms that you have to fill out, the W-4, or whether it's the forms that you get in, the W-2s, the 1099s, all the different types of forms. I always like to recommend going to the source, which is the IRS. They have a lot of features on their website to help with those types of questions. If you go to irs.gov, I'm not off the top of my head, I can't remember where to go to on there, but if you go there and get some taxpayer help, that might be a start. But there's also different community resources. I can't remember the name of them, but it'll come to me soon. But if you go to the main source, if you go to the IRS, they have people that are able to provide that type of assistance in terms of what to put on your W-4, or talking with other VISTA members to see what they did. It's not professional advice, but it is peer advice. I think it's one stop shop. I forget. I'll think of it or look it up in the meantime. But if you go to the IRS site, you should be able to find some tax assistance through them.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And I'll just add to what Taryn said. Don't forget that you can always change the amount of allowances you claimed on your W-4 in your MyAmeriCorps account, and that change will take effect in the next pay period. So if you think you made a mistake, or if, as Taryn said, you realize something different and you want to change it, you can change your W-4 at any time, and the change will take effect the next pay period.
Great. And for anyone who has additional income outside of VISTA, like a second job, remember that that income is taxable as well. And depending on how much your income grows, you could be eligible to leap into another tax bracket, so you might be responsible for more taxes. So keep in mind that it's not just your VISTA income, but it'll be any income that you earn during the calendar year that will be counted for your taxes. And also remember that VISTA does not take out state taxes. We don't have jurisdiction to do that. So you may or may not be responsible for paying in, but you are responsible to make sure that you are aware that that is something that you might need to pay in. So you can check with your state not your state office, but your state tax office for more details. Okay, Jessica would like to know, if you already receive government benefits, for example, SSI or SSA, receiving the living allowances, is it considered extra income or scholarship? Eric, what do you think about that one?
That is a great question. And the answer would be, it is considered extra income. However, if you were already receiving the government benefits prior to joining VISTA, as we mentioned earlier, your VISTA living allowance shouldn't be accounted against you. And that's where the service letters that Molly talked about in your MyAmeriCorps account come in handy. You can generate those and send them to the benefits provider to let them know that you were already receiving it before you joined VISTA, and your VISTA living allowance should not count against those benefits, government benefits that you're already receiving.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Eric. And Kenya wants to know, is it required that we get health insurance? The fine for not having it is less than paying for it every month. Kenya, that sounds like a personal choice. We recommend that you do receive that you do meet the minimal required coverage. But Taryn, how would you respond to that? Is it required that they have health insurance?
Good question, and yes, it is required. And from doing taxes and seeing how the penalty might have been affordable in the first year, I do believe that the penalty increases in year 2, and then in the additional year, I think it goes up again. So it's something that you really need to look at and understand, because one, is maybe affordable just to pay the penalty. However, it might be more affordable to try to find something that you can afford to cover you should you get hurt, sick, or need some type of medical attention while you are serving. And so those health navigators will help. I know that in terms of taxes and penalties, you can find out more information about that through the IRS, but I think it's something where you need to realize that it is required that you have some type of benefit.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that very sage advice, Taryn. Okay, so Brad, do we have any questions on the phone?
We have had no responses, Miss.
Okay. I think we have, for the most part, covered the questions that are coming into the Q&A. Let's see. Julia says, why have I received my reimbursement while others have not? Julia, if you are referring to your PSO reimbursement, you might have gone to a different PSO than some of the other attendees, and also different people process their information. So it might just be a case of workload, but everyone will get their reimbursement within 8 to 10 weeks of PSO, and in most cases it's been happening pretty soon. So, okay. All right, Anna wants to know, I'm wondering if it is legal for VISTA workers to unionize. And Anna, that really isn't the topic of this webinar, but you know, I think you might need to, why don't you send me an email? I think you can find my email address. It's mpelzer@cns.gov, and then we can chat about that offline. All right, so let's see. Darla says, about the supervisor signature approval, I'm not understanding what happens if I go to my supervisor, she denies my request to take another job. Considering the second job doesn't conflict with my VISTA project, how much legal right, I think it gets cut off there, but how much legal right does that supervisor have? And let's see. Taryn, since you work at a state office, you might have seen some approvals come through. Do you maybe want to explain a little bit about why a supervisor may or may not approve a request for a second position?
Definitely. Let me just start a little bit further back. So going back to education, and when we first started allowing VISTA members to take education courses, because they weren't always allowed to do that, and it came down to the supervisor and VISTA member having a conversation, and if it didn't affect the VISTA's term of service and didn't affect their assignment, great, no problem. If the education course did affect the assignment, the only choice left was the VISTA member needing to decide between the job or between the education course or the VISTA assignment, and that was it. The state office was not involved in the pre-approval stage. Now that we have a new policy in terms of outside employment, it's again where the corporation, state office, is somewhat involved in the pre-approval, meaning the VISTA and the supervisor have a conversation. They talk about how the second job is not going to affect the assignment. If the supervisor agrees and approves of it, great. That form gets sent to us, and it gets sent to our headquarters, and we review to make sure we're all on board, and it gets placed in the member's file. If the supervisor doesn't believe that the second job will be conducive to the VISTA member's assignment, meaning they can't do both the second job and the VISTA assignment, then the corporation state office should be involved in terms of mitigating that form and talking about it and seeing why. If the corporation state office agrees that it is going to get in the way of the assignment, then unfortunately, that request is not approved. If the corporation state office feels that the VISTA member could do the assignment for some reasons that maybe the supervisor wasn't thinking of, then the corporation state office would have a conversation with the VISTA member and the supervisor to kind of come to an agreement on it. So if a supervisor didn't approve of it, it's something that, one, they would have either brought to the corporation state office attention, or the VISTA member should, so that there can be just a little bit more further discussion as to why it was disapproved, because it is a new policy. It's something that we are just kind of experiencing as we go along, and so we want to kind of understand why some things are approved and others are not. And again, if it's not approved by the supervisor, that doesn't mean that's it. There should be further conversation with the state office. If there was conversation with the state office and they agreed that it wasn't approved, then unfortunately I would say that that would be the final decision based on that particular other outside employment. It doesn't mean that all outside employment would be denied. It would just be that particular case. So I think to look at it definitely by a case-by-case basis. Does that help somewhat?
Yeah, I think that was a great overview, Taryn. Thank you so much. So I think what the main point is to make sure that you communicate with your supervisor in many of the ways in which Aaron discussed it, but don't give up hope if the supervisor says no, because the state office should also be involved in that review process, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Great. All right. So, Eric, here's a question for you. Bree would like to know, how exactly will the income disregard letter affect SNAP benefits? Can you review that one more time?
Sure. So simply, if you apply for SNAP benefits during your year of service or after you officially join VISTA, then your VISTA Living Allowance will count against you because it's counted as income as part of your SNAP benefits. If you had been receiving SNAP benefits prior to joining VISTA, then you'd easily be able to use the disregard letter to say that you had already been receiving the government benefits before you joined the program, and your living allowance should not count against you. But if you're already currently serving and applying for SNAP, then the disregard letter wouldn't really come into play specifically with SNAP, just because of the way they manage and take care of all the needs they have for that benefit.
And just to clarify, Bree has a follow-up question. The SNAP benefit, the DISCOM in regard letter, is not an application for the SNAP benefit, right? It's just something to take with you to the meeting or to the appointment, right, Eric?
That is correct.
Okay, great. And where could they find the public income disregard letter?
Once you finish PSO and are activated as a VISTA, if you log into your my.americorps.gov account, on the left-hand side of links, you'll see My Living Allowance, My Tax Statements. About halfway down, there should be a link called My Service Letter, and simply you just click the drop-down menu to select the term of service for which you want the letter to be generated. Then you choose which service letter to print, and it'll open up in a PDF that you can save or print for your needs.
And also, if they have any questions about that, they could just reach out to the VMSU, the VISTA Member Support Unit, for additional assistance too, right, Eric?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Let's see, Taryn, I have another tax question for you. Leticia would like to know, if I opt to have an additional amount withheld from my pay, what happens with that amount?
Good question. Good question. If you have an additional amount opted to be withdrawn from your pay, whether it be federal or if you communicate with the state tax department and have actively try to have state taxes taken out. But if you have federal taken out, it will go towards your tax liability, meaning when you file taxes, say in February of next year, you, based on your income, have to pay taxes just for working in America. If you don't have any taxes to pay, then you would just get that money back, including your withholdings that you had taken out of your check. So it would be the regular taxes taken out plus the additional. If you had any tax liability where you did have to pay some taxes back, that additional withholding would go towards that. So it would look like money going towards taxes that you have to pay just based on filing taxes, but it also could look like a bigger refund should you not have a tax liability, or say you would owe in state taxes, you could get that money from the federal and then apply it to state taxes if you owed any money in state. So it helps paying taxes when it comes time to filing taxes.
Mm-hmm. And somewhat of a follow-up question, because it's also to do about taxes. It seems like that's a hot topic today. Taryn, if we work in a different state than our home address, do we have to file a separate state income tax form for where we're serving?
Good question again. It depends if you worked where you came from. So if you have income in a particular state, you might have to file taxes in that state. So if you were living in New York previously and had a job there, then moved to Pennsylvania and are doing VISTA here, so you have income here, you would have to file taxes in both states. I don't want to get into too much detail, but it just depends on if you had income while you were in those states. If you had income in those states, then you would have to pull up the forms for those states to see what type of form you'd have to file come tax time.
Great. Thank you so much, Taryn. It's so useful to have you on this call with your tax knowledge. Shifting gears a little bit, Eric, I will send this one to you. Julia would like to know, how many hours can your site make you work in a given week? What if they're making you work 40 to 55 plus hours a week?
Julia, great question. All of the supervisors that we train are aware of kind of the policy that VISTAs are full-time, and usually that's 40 hours a week for VISTA. Now there are certainly some cases where there may be an additional project they want you to work on, or something on a weekend once or twice where you may work some extra hours, and they might be able to be a little flexible, but in general, it's not really common that a supervisor would ask you to be working 50-plus hours a week on a regular basis. If it does appear that you think you're working a lot more than 40 hours, and you should definitely be in direct contact with your corporation state office. As Taryn mentioned earlier in the presentation, just email the two-letter state abbreviation at cns.gov, just so at least they're aware of it, but also check with your supervisor to find out, is this just a one-week thing where there's a lot of work that needs to get done this week and then it'll even out, or perhaps maybe the supervisor just didn't understand the reasoning. But always communicate with your corporation state office if there's any questions about not following VISTA policy according to what your supervisor has laid out for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. Looks like we've made it through most of the questions, if not all of them. I apologize if I have missed any. I want to thank you guys all so much for joining us. And do any of our presenters have any parting words or any final comments to share with everyone before I talk about the next upcoming exciting webinar?
This is Karen. I just want to say it's great to see so many participants doing this webinar and taking the time to not only hear what we had to present, but also share experiences, share resources and tools that you found to help to help you through your term of service, whether you're just starting out or whether you're a couple months in. I think it's important to always network with each other. So there's lots of resources and tools and forums that you can reach out to other VISTA members that are in your community, in your state, across the country. So I just recommend you keep on sharing with each other and use each other as your big network to get through the service year and to learn a lot about yourself as well as the community you're serving. So I wish you all the best of luck, and again, thanks for participating.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of our presenters, Eric, Taryn, and Aaron, one more time. And thank you all so much for attending. And I just want to say again, following up on Taryn's comments, it's been great. We do have another webinar coming up that I hope you all can join us for. We will talk about translating your VISTA service to your resume next week, next Thursday, I believe. And we've done this webinar before, and it is so popular, and the presenter is fantastic, as all of our presenters are. So it's never too early or too late to start thinking about what you might do after your VISTA service. So we hope you can join us next Thursday. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the presentation and production team, and thank you for serving. Have a great year of service. Take care, everyone.